Welcome, everybody. What's going on? This is Fantasy Football Today here on CBS Sports Network, and we have a lot to cover. There are quarterback competitions. There are injuries to star players. There are holdouts. There are hold-ins. I'm drafting better teams than Jamey in the same draft. This is unbelievable, these developments. We're going to cover it all for you, help you sort it out, and get you ready for your fantasy drafts right now on FFT. Welcome. I am Adam Azer. Oh, hey. Didn't even see you there, Jamey. What's going on? You may have heard some rumors about me talking smack about you. Just ignore them. How's it going?
I'll give you your credit. You had a very good draft. It's good to finish second place, though.
And Dave Richard is here. What's up, Dave?
I hate finishing in second place. It's heartache that you carry for like 8 months out of the year. Nobody wants that. Finishing in first is what matters. I don't think you did that, though, Adam.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I was talking about my fantasy league yesterday with my buddies that it was decided on Jahmyr Gibbs' touchdown run in week 17, and it came down to decimal points. He needed almost every yard of it. Would you rather lose, come in second place in that fashion, or just not make the playoffs and not have to deal with that heartbreak?
Yeah. I don't want that heartbreak. Put me in 8th place.
I'd rather get paid. I'll take second place.
Yeah, he got paid, He got paid second
All
place.
right. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. I was just thinking about the mental anguish that he had to go through.
Yeah, no, he's still not
I'll pay for your therapy. Don't worry.
Exactly. Listen, we got 4 big topics to get to, and unfortunately, we got to talk about injuries here, even though it's July 28th. Which injury is having the biggest impact on your rankings? Justin Jefferson could be out a few weeks. Joe Mixon, we don't even know if he's going to be ready for week 1. He's got a foot issue. Juwan Jennings left with an injury over the weekend. Matthew Stafford is going to miss at least this week with a back issue. Jamey, of these 4, which one is impacting your rankings the most right now?
It's Joe Mixon. I was already a little bit concerned about him coming into the season before this, news. He was already dealing with this injury in the offseason when he was, seen in a walking boot and didn't take part in really any of the offseason activities. They bring in 2 running backs for competition, whether that was more of an indication on Dameon Pierce and Dario Gumbawale, or they wanted to take some of the work off of Mixon, who was number 7 in the NFL last year, touches per game at 20.1. He missed 3 games last year due to injury. He's 29 years old. He's going to play behind a worse offensive line than he had last year, at least by all the people who rank offensive lines. And so Mixon was already trending in the wrong direction for me. This makes me basically out on Joe Mixon unless I'm getting him probably in round 7 or later. He may fall to that spot depending on how long this lingers, but that'll probably drop my feeling about when I want to take him as well. So I'm most likely not going to draft a lot of Joe Mixon this year.
Yeah, Dave, same question to you. These injuries, which one is having the biggest impact on your rankings? And if it is Mixon, maybe you want to say who's in second place in this list?
I mean, it's definitely Mixon because the reports say that he might miss most, if not all, of training camp and the preseason. He's had quad, foot, and multiple ankle injuries in the past calendar year. It's a problem. Stafford would be next up, but it's not being reflected in my rankings yet because I expect Matthew Stafford to be ready to go at some point during the preseason. This is a veteran who knows what he's doing. Same thing with Justin Jefferson. As long as they're in camp and practicing by, let's call it August 21st, they're going to be fine. And if you can get them at a draft day discount, you should get them, especially in the case of Jefferson. I doubt you will, but maybe you get Jefferson at like 7th or 8th overall instead of as a top 5 pick. I'd say you're winning in that case.
Back in 2022, Matthew Stafford had an elbow injury in the preseason. Now, he only ended up playing 9 games that year, but it was completely unrelated to the elbow. I think it was a spinal cord contusion. For those 9 games, though, Cooper Kupp also played 9 games that year. Cooper Kupp was the number 1 wide receiver per game. Now, the Rams offense really struggled, though, but Cooper Kupp did not. He was number 1 per game. So a preseason injury in 2022 did not really affect the top pass catcher for the Rams.
I mean, that might be relevant now, though, Adam, because you're talking about a spinal injury for a guy that's 37 dealing with a back injury right now. So, hopefully he's going to be fine. But at his age, the way that they paid him, remember, they structured it to do a year-by-year deal with him at this point until he decides to retire. It's just a little concerning, and it should be a little concerning for Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams because we don't know how those two guys are going to cannibalize each other a little bit. And while it's easy to say, okay, Puka will be fine and just continue to do what he's done, and Adams just kind of slide into the Cooper Kupp role, I hope that's exactly what happens and we get that type of production. But what if Adams is better than Nacua? What if Nacua takes a step back for a guy you're taking in round one? What if Adams at 32 years old doesn't take the step, or continue on the same level of production that he had last year with the Jets? Like, this could be troubling if it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo was not good for Devontae Adams with the Raiders in 2023, and it could be bad for Puka as well.
Okay, let's move on to our second big topic, and it's the Cowboys backfield. Javonte Williams is currently not a top 100 pick in Fantasy Pros PPR ADP. He's about 107th. Got a report over the weekend, not a report, but a quote from the head coach talking about maybe splitting with Miles Sanders. Dave, what do you make of the Cowboys backfield?
I mean, I don't want to make anything of it, but given the ADP and the fact that we're talking about a pick in like round 8, round 9 for a potential starting running back, how am I going to fault anybody for taking a shot on Javonte Williams, even though he's been terrible the last 2 seasons? It was on a different team. He himself hasn't been explosive. 7 games with 15 or more PPR points over the last 2 years for Javonte, but his competition for playing time is really laughable, to be honest. And we know that he's going to be good to go in passing down situations. So again, if we're talking about round 9, round 10 for a potential starting running back, you're not going to use him in your fantasy lineup as a starter, but he could end up being a decent bye week replacement. And then who knows, maybe Dallas's offense gets him going a little bit. He says he's in better shape now than he was 2 years ago. Maybe he shows us something this year, and certainly the catches will count. If it's in PPR leagues, he'll get a bunch of those too.
Jamey, for Javonte, it was a torn ACL, a torn LCL, and posterolateral corner. I struggle sometimes with some of these ligaments in the knee. And I don't know if that is why doesn't it just say PCL then? It's the something corner. Anyway, is it possible that we just haven't seen a healthy version of Javonte, as Dave was alluding to, in 2 years, and he could be a steal?
He absolutely could, and you should stick to juggling more so than reading medical terminology.
That was juggling.
For me, when I see those 4 names, I'd rather just go Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson and avoid the backfield for the Cowboys and just really focus on the passing game. I think that's going to be the dominant part of this offense, clearly. We could get a potential flex play out of the backfield, but I think the passing game is going to be absolutely fantastic. I want pieces of all 4 of those guys at varying costs. Ferguson, a late-round tight end, dart throw if you miss on the position. Pickens has number 2 wide receiver upside. You could draft as number 3 receiver. CeeDee Lamb could easily be the number 1 receiver this year. He tied points per game for Jamar Chase in 2023 when he had a healthy Dak Prescott. And maybe the best quote so far of anybody in training camp when he said, "Let me remind you of what I can be when Dak Prescott is healthy." And obviously Prescott has been a very good fantasy quarterback, one of the more underrated guys. So I'm just going to skip the running backs as much as I can and focus on as many pieces of that passing game as I could possibly get.
Next big storyline. Let's talk about Travis Hunter. So rookie wide receiver here, rookie cornerback as well. And he's basically been splitting evenly among the 2 positions in Jaguars camp so far. And his playing time, we just don't know what it's going to be, Jamey, in terms of how many snaps he gets at wide receiver. But it could be a very important question, very important answer to get in terms of fantasy production, fantasy value. So what you've seen so far from Hunter in Jaguars camp, where's that making you want to take Hunter, who is currently 61st overall, wide receiver 27 in Fantasy Pros ADP?
That's basically where I have him ranked. I was a little bit too high on him probably before the start of training camp. I had him at wide receiver 24, taking him in early round 5. Now it's the back end of round 5, basically where he's going. There's so much upside here. Look, you see what this receiving core is. They're talking up Parker Washington. Diami Brown's a guy that they signed who really didn't do much when he was in Washington. We all remember the big Hail Mary play, but otherwise it's been a very non-existent stretch of career for him. So these guys are going to have opportunities to make plays. Really, it makes me want to get Brian Thomas in the late round 1, early round 2, because I think he's going to get fed targets again like we saw last season. But in terms of Hunter, I think he's a good number 3 fantasy receiver to start your team. If you play in a 2 receiver league and you don't have to play him at either a wide receiver spot or a flex and just see how this plays out, that's the best case scenario. But I think as a number 3 receiver, he's going to spend most of his time, at least the way I expect it right now, on offense and hopefully be enough of a playmaker. Liam Cohen's system, as we saw in Tampa Bay, will funnel targets to two guys and the top two guys on the field. It was the case with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans to start last season. Then when we had the injuries at the end of the year, it was Evans and Jalen McMillan. There's a huge opportunity here for Travis Hunter, so hopefully he spends more of his time on the offensive side of the ball. But I think if you're drafting him as a starter in 2 receiver leagues, you're making a mistake. A high-end number 3 receiver is where I'd want to get Travis Hunter, at least right now.
Okay. I'm going to ask both of you to rank 3 wide receivers, Jamey, then Dave. Travis Hunter, Zay Flowers, Jameson Williams.
Williams, Hunter, Flowers.
I have the exact same order.
Well, how about that, Dave? Look at us. All right, Dave, which quarterback competition is catching your eye right now? That's our 4th big topic. We've got Kenny Pickett getting injured in Cleveland. We've got just a total rotation in New Orleans. 2 quarterbacks that are not exactly getting rave reviews in Indianapolis. Which one's catching your eye?
I mean, for fantasy purposes, none of the above. You've got like 25 other quarterbacks across the National Football League that you're going to consider before you even look at a quarterback in New Orleans, Cleveland, or Indianapolis. Honestly, when I look at these quarterback competitions, I'm thinking about who are the wide receivers who can benefit. And I wonder if the answer to that is also none of the above. And that could be bad news for Jerry Jeudy, who I'm taking in that same range as Travis Hunter. And maybe that's going to end up being a mistake because the Browns have so many issues at quarterback. And then New Orleans, I've loved Chris Olave for years. I think he's a great talent. We know last year he dealt with a bunch of injuries. Now we know he's going to have a quarterback downgrade, even though he should be in a bunch of games where he sees 7+ targets per game. And then I just think in Indianapolis, it's a wasteland for wide receivers. I like the tight end in Indianapolis, Tyler Warren. I like David Njoku in Cleveland. There isn't a tight end that I really love in New Orleans. But when I think about those quarterback competitions, I think about the wide receivers there. And then I think about not really wanting a piece of them on my fantasy teams. So you could see guys like Jeudy and Olave start to slide even further down my rankings as these quarterback competitions go on.
Yeah, I go the complete other way. I'm very intrigued by all 3 of these, mostly because of the wide receivers. I think there's so much upside for a lot of these teams and a lot of these players if the right quarterback is in place. Now, obviously for Indianapolis, it's more about the quarterback, I think, than the receiving core. But you're hopeful that you'll get some quality production for guys like Tyler Warren and Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. This could be a disappointing situation because those guys have so much upside, as we've seen at times throughout their careers, and for Warren coming into the NFL. But if Richardson does win that job and can play like the guy we've seen in spurts, he could be the best running quarterback, which we know is great for fantasy. So it could be one of the best sleepers that you'll see at any position if he does stay healthy and play like the player that we've seen when he's been at his best. Unfortunately, there's been too much of him playing at his worst. In the situation in Cleveland, I just hope it's Joe Flacco. Like, you could tell me Shadur Sanders, but he's been running with the 4 team, which I think is a big indication of what they think of him. I hope it's not Dylan Gabriel. With Pickett's injury right now, I hope that just clears the way for Flacco to be the guy, and they've kind of been managing his snaps because they know he's going to be the guy, and that would make Jerry Jeudy a potential top 15 wide receiver. You're not drafting him that way. And the same thing with David Njoku, a top 5 tight end. We saw that in 2023. We saw that with Jeudy last year when he had Jameis Winston throwing him the ball. The New Orleans situation, I think, is going to be a disaster across the board no matter who the starter is. So I think if you're just buying Olave at the right price, buying Alvin Kamara at the right price, and taking maybe a flyer on Rashid Shaheed with the hope that maybe he gets a few big plays throughout the course of the season, that's really the way I would approach it. But I'm very curious about all these guys, because all these situations, because I think we could find some really good fantasy options if the right quarterback is throwing to those receivers.
Okay, up next, we've got a segment that I was inspired, by every mic check I do with Dave and Jamey. They say, "You don't belong here." And that's the name of our upcoming segment. We'll show you how it works after this on Fantasy Football Today. All right, listen, you don't belong here, okay? We've all heard that. Maybe just me. Anyway, welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm going to give you a player in each of the first 4 rounds based on Fantasy Pros PPR ADP. I'm going to tell you why that player doesn't belong in that round. But Dave, I'm going to let you criticize me even before the segment starts, because I don't even necessarily believe in all these, because I think ADP right now looks pretty good. So just bear with me, Dave. I'm going to have to make some cases that are a kind of a stretch, if you don't mind.
You mean you're playing devil's advocate?
Yeah, a little bit. I'd
rather play Hungry Hippos.
All right, but I I believe in the theory behind this. Okay, so I'm going to look at a round one guy. You don't belong in round one, Malik Nabers. Not because you are not incredibly talented, but because if I look at the top 8 wide receivers, Malik Nabers, to me, has by far the worst situation. We're not talking about the Bengals or the Vikings or the Cowboys or the Rams or even the Jaguars or the Texans or the Lions. We're talking about the New York Giants, who are one of the laughingstocks of football. I actually look at their team, their personnel, and say, they could have a decent offense. They could. They've got a stud left tackle. They've got an experienced quarterback. They've got Malik Nabers. They could be okay, but they also have the toughest schedule in football on paper. I think they're going to lose a lot of games, and I think they're going to turn to Jackson Dart. So I love Malik Nabers, but I also love all of the top 8 wide receivers. Dave, I think he's got the worst situation of them. Nico Collins is a second-round pick. Devon Achane is a second-round pick. Brian Thomas Jr. is a second-round pick. I think they should all go ahead of Malik Nabers, and he should be more like a top 15 pick instead of a top 10 pick, which he currently is.
So full disclosure for the audience, Adam is a diehard New York Giants fan, and he's putting the kibosh on his own favorite team. Look, he wasn't in a great situation last year. His quarterback stunk. His offensive line got knocked down. He missed a couple of games with a concussion. Still averaged a ton of PPR points per game, 18.2. But more importantly, he averaged 11.3 targets per game. He was even good in the 5 games he had 9 or fewer targets, and he averaged 17.1 PPR points. Now I'd say he's getting an upgrade at quarterback. It's not a huge upgrade. It's Russell Wilson. It's Jackson Dart. And I was a fan of Jackson Dart coming out of college. I think he'll actually be quite good for the Giants. And I think that we'll see Malik Nabers continue to play in a huge role for them. He is their offense, especially when they're trailing in the second half of games. That's when that target volume will really get going. And that's when fantasy managers will start earning some points. As worried as you are about him maybe not being in the best offense or being the most consistent wide receiver, he still has the case to be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. He is that good of a talent, and he is going to get that kind of an opportunity from game to game.
Jamey?
I mean, Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, Drew Lock, those guys were terrible. And Malik Nabers still survived through it all. Yes, Jackson Dart, maybe a downgrade from those guys. I doubt it. I would take Jackson Dart over all those guys right now without throwing a pass in the NFL. And Russell Wilson hopefully will start the majority of the season. Malik Nabers is going to lead the NFL in targets, and he's going to be just fine. He's a first-round talent by far.
I forgot to mention, he also has a toe injury that might need surgery. So that makes me a little bit squeamish, too. Actually,
listen,
Adam.
Injury is clearly something to be concerned about if he's hurt. But if we're going to make that argument, we have to make it for Justin Jefferson. We have to make it for Puka Nacua. We have to make it for anybody that's got either an injury to themselves or an injury to the quarterback that's throwing the ball.
Well, no. If they were saying, well, Justin Jefferson's going to play through this hamstring injury, but he might need surgery after the season, that's a little bit different than Justin Jefferson's going to take 3 weeks off and be 100% when he comes back. Malik Nabers is not going to be 100%. And when the ship is sinking, I definitely see a possibility of them shutting him down. Look, I'm nitpicking because he's great, but he has, to me, the worst situation of the top 8 receivers. But
all right, next commercial, take off your Giants pajama pants, and we'll talk about something else.
It's a onesie. All right, let's go to the second round. You don't belong here, lad McConkey. And here's the thing. I was actually going to do Lamar Jackson, but I knew I'd make the case, and you guys would be like, yep, you're right. So I chose Lad McConkey. I love Lad McConkey. He's so good. But there aren't a lot of wide receivers that finish top 12 in full PPR. He's wide receiver 11, by the way, in ADP, Lad McConkey. Finish top 12 on offenses that are bottom 5 in pass attempts. It's pretty rare. And if they finish top 12, they're usually pretty close to 12. So I cannot guarantee you that the Chargers are going to be bottom 5 in pass attempts. But I do think it's pretty reasonable to see that, right? After signing Najee and drafting Hampton and having a pretty good offensive line, and look who their coaches are. So, Jamey, to me, that's the only concern for McConkey is target volume. Even at his best, he wasn't getting a ton of targets last year. So I think that could make him more like a round 3 pick. And to be fair, he is going at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably nitpicking in terms of where his ADP is versus where, most people would draft him. I think anywhere from between 20 and 28 is where you'll see him come off the board, depending on the format. I think the best thing about this is you look at the way that they drafted, and added to this team, and now Mike Williams is retired. You're talking about two guys that are going to play on the outside in terms of Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris, the rookie that they added. I think McConkey's going to get fed targets. And I always like to look up, depending on the system, well, what does the quarterback sort of tell us in terms of tendencies? Well, his favorite receiver to start his career was Keenan Allen, who played the majority of the time in the slot. Ladd McConkey's going to see time in the slot, a short area guy that can make some big plays and be explosive. And so we'll see if Aronde Gadsden has a big opportunity here as a tight end in a tight end friendly offense, or Tyler Conklin, somebody who got added as a free agent, and I think is a little underrated in terms of this team. We know they're going to run the ball. They told us that by bringing in Amari and Hampton and Najee Harris and doing what they started to do last year, which was feed J.K. Dobbins until Herbert got healthy. I think that was a big part of when McConkey took off, is when Herbert's foot injury finally healed. So he's going to lead the team in targets. It just depends, I think, on where you're viewing him and how high you think he can get to. I don't think he has the ceiling of Malik Nabers or Brian Thomas, the two rookies that he's, being compared to coming off of the stellar 2024 standout rookie campaign for all three of those guys. He's basically sort of the bridge receiver for me. I did move Tyreek Hill ahead of him. I have T. Higgins ahead of him. He's not a top 10 receiver. He's actually 13th for me. But I think if you get him at the end of round 2, beginning of round 3, depending on how you want to build your team, he's one of the safer picks that still has top 10 upside, just not top 5 upside.
Here's my favorite Ladd McConkey stat, guys. There were 8 games last year where the Chargers had 20 or more running back runs. And remember, they had J.K. Dobbins and a lot of filth at running back last year, and obviously it's upgraded this year. McConkey averaged 6.5 targets per game. Oh, that's gross. No one wants that. Well, he averaged 7 for the season, and in those 8 games, he still averaged 16 PPR points per game, and he scored 6 of his 8 touchdowns. He's going to be just fine. Jamey said it best. He's not going to have that huge upside. He's exactly the type of safe receiver that you're looking for in the 2-3 turn. I think he's decidedly right within those last 3 picks of round number 2. And I think he's a really good player who could see a target uptick, especially if something happens to that run game, because we saw it last year. His targets did go up to 8.2 per game in 9 games when the Chargers ran the ball 19 or fewer times with their running backs.
All right, guys. So I got 2 more here. I'm going to go to round 3. And Dave, I'm going to throw this one to you. And then Jamey, I'll give you the round 4 guy. Round 3, Tyreek Hill. You don't belong here. You belong in round 2. And honestly, no one's drafted in round 1, but it wouldn't surprise me if you should have been drafted in round 1. Dave, you don't go from 2 straight 1,700-yard seasons to being not even a top 35 wide receiver per game at age 30, by the way. He was 30 last year, which really isn't that old for an elite wide receiver. Now he's 31. Unless there's a reason for it. It was so obvious. It was the preseason wrist injury that got worse when he got arrested. And they changed their offensive philosophy because he wasn't the same. He is the best player on this team. They will give him the ball. He'll do his thing. He's going to be a steal, Tyreek Hill, if he lasts to round 3, Dave.
I would agree 100%. I love that he's now at his playing weight that he was in Kansas City. He's lost a few pounds. He's got a new mentality to his game too. He's trying to be more of a leader in the locker room. And that just tells me that he's taking football more seriously than he might have in years past, and years past plural. Obviously last year, nightmare. He had the wrist injury. I think there are other things going on with the Dolphins offense that made their offense look really terrible. And 2 years ago, 1 year ago, or 1 year before then, I should say, yeah, Tua was on fire for the Dolphins. I would expect him to be somewhere in between his 2023 and 2024 seasons, which makes his selection, again, late round 2. I agree that Tyreek should go ahead of Ladd McConkey, a really good value pick. This one you're right on, Adam. He should be a round 2 pick, and not everybody in every league is going to believe in it because he's coming off of a down year. Bounce back season coming for Tyreek.
Don't sound so surprised if I'm right on one, okay? Jamey, last one's going to you. Round 4, Alvin Kamara. You don't belong here, Alvin Kamara. You belong in round 5 because the Saints are a disaster. And I'm just going to leave it at that, Jamey. I think that this offense is going to be so bad that it will pull him down. And he's still going about 41st overall. I mean, there's just too many good players on the board at that point. Obviously, he needs to catch a lot of passes, and he will. But I cannot take a top 40 or 42-ish pick on a guy on what might be the worst offense in football by far.
He's one of the more polarizing players. And, it's the offense, it's his age. We saw him miss the final 3 games of the season last year with a groin injury. I think there will be more competition for touches this year because there's no more Dennis Allen, so maybe Kendrick Miller gets an opportunity. They drafted Devin Neal, somebody I think that they like. So we'll see if that hurts Kamara as well. The thing that I keep going back to, though, is he did play 4 games with Spencer Rattler as the quarterback, and he scored 17 plus PPR points in 3 of those. And so format matters for him more than maybe any player in fantasy, because in full PPR, he's going to benefit immensely. In half and non, he's going to struggle a little bit because exactly what you said, this offense could be bad. So the touchdowns, which we know has been a problem for him, whether Taysom Hill has been there or not, that I think could be an issue once again. So in PPR, I think round 4 is the earliest you should look for him. For me, it would be toward the end of round 4. So yes, if you get him around 5, I love that. And so he's in that group of running backs with Breece Hall's got questions about his offense, quarterback problems potentially, and what the usage could be. Chuba Hubbard, who may have some competition for touches this year, more so than we saw last year. Omarion Hampton's in that group now because of the Najee Harris injury. So there's questions with all these guys. But in PPR, it's hard to overlook what Kamara's been. And I think if you just lower the expectations a little bit for a guy that averaged 19 PPR points per game, I would think it's going to be somewhere in the 16, 17 point per game range, which puts him in the round 4, round 5 category. It just depends on if you're comparing him to receivers, the quarterbacks that'll be on the board at that point, maybe a tight end or two. So I think if you're just looking at him as a good number 2 running back, not somebody I think that will be a number 1 guy again because of everything that's happening to him, but I do think he'll be a little bit safer in PPR than people realize.
Okay, that is it for You Don't Belong Here. You know what? Everyone belongs. So we are going to put Dave and Jamey on the clock in our next segment. We're going to give them some draft day scenarios and see what they're going to do. And we'll be right back after this on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I am Adam Azer. They are Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. And Dave and Jamey, you are on the clock. Here we go. We're going to give you some draft scenarios, starting with round 1, pick 4. All right, you're on the clock with 104. These 3 players are still on the board. Jamey, we'll start with you. Who are you taking? CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, or Jahmyr Gibbs?
Pretty easy for me. It's CeeDee Lamb. I think with a healthy Dak Prescott, he's going to dominate again like we saw in 2023. Maybe not to the same heights, but number 1 receiver by far. Already talking about being that guy once again. I'm not worried about George Pickens taking away too much from CeeDee Lamb. He could easily be the number 1 player in fantasy this year, so give me him as my 3rd overall player, so I'll be glad to get him at number 4.
I'll take the running back. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the way to go here. He averaged more PPR points per game than both Lamb and Jefferson in the 14 games that he was with David Montgomery last year. Of course, we all know about those other games that he played without Montgomery. He was the best player in fantasy. He outscored pretty much every quarterback on top of everybody else. So I really think that there is huge upside for Jahmyr Gibbs to break his record. It's not really a record, Adam. He's had 52 catches each of his first 2 seasons. I think he does better there. I think he scores a ton of touchdowns. I think he's a candidate for 2,000 total yards and just an absolute beast at running back for Detroit. I'll take Gibbs ever so slightly over Jefferson and Lamb.
Well, you guys rigged the draft order because not only did you have 104, you also have 107. Congratulations. You're on the clock. And these 4 players are still on the board. Dave, who are you taking? Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, or let's get a wide receiver, Puka Nacua.
It's an interesting group, and I would imagine that the general public will take Saquon Barkley. I will not be in that general public group. I'm a little worried about Saquon, believe it or not, after the year he just had. I'm going to roll the dice with Devon Achane, who I view as a younger version of Christian McCaffrey. 22.6 PPR points per game in 11 games with Tua Tagovailoa last year. I do worry about Tua surviving for the whole season and those other games that Tua doesn't play. What does that mean for Devon Achane? I'm not really thinking about that as much, though, because I think the Dolphins did upgrade at backup quarterback this offseason. And I think Achane is still an ascending talent who's going to catch a lot of passes and be very involved in this Dolphins offense. So I will take him over Christian McCaffrey, who would be my 2nd pick of the 4.
Yeah, give me McCaffrey easily in this one. Last time we saw him play a full season, 23 PPR points per game in 2023. And you're looking at this receiving core right now for the 49ers. You have Juwan Jennings hurt or dealing with a contract situation. Who knows when Brandon Ayuk will play? Ricky Pearsall's already had a hamstring injury, just got back from the PUP list. We'll see if he's able to stay healthy for the majority of the season. I think this offense is going to run through McCaffrey a lot. In the passing game, on the ground, he is basically a touchdown per game based on how I think we're going to see this offense operate. Love the situation for McCaffrey. Give me him at 6th overall if he's there. I would take him as high as 5 overall as well. So to get him at number 7 would be stealing.
Okay, let's go to the second round now. You guys are back on the clock. Thankfully, you're not really sharing a team. Doesn't seem to be a lot of agreement here. But we'll see if you can agree on pick 203. You've already got your wide receiver 1. Okay, that's the scenario. You've got your wide receiver 1, and these 4 players are on the board. Who are you taking? Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Brock Bowers, or Brian Thomas Jr.? Jamey, you've got a wide receiver. What's your next pick?
Yeah, I'm going receiver. Give me Brian Thomas Jr. Love the setup for him, especially if Travis Hunter is going to see potentially as much time on defense as it's leaning that way right now. So love the setup for him. And Liam Cohen's offense was dominant to close the season last year. Did not have Trevor Lawrence or Liam Cohen on his side when that was the case. I think it's going to be another big season for Brian Thomas. So I'm going to go receiver, and dominate this draft.
I'm going to go for the balanced approach and take Derrick Henry. 19.8 PPR points per game last year. He averaged 21.4 PPR points per game in 14 games where he had at least 14 touches. I think he's going to have a lot of games with 14 plus touches this year for Baltimore as well. Their defense is better. It's setting up for him to have a smash season. The only argument against Derrick Henry that I've found is that he's old. And, you know, I guess that's kind of a factor, but he's been an older running back for a long time. People have said that he's due for a breakdown. I'm not betting against Derrick Henry. I think he's going to be the best of these 4. It's who I would take, especially if I took a wide receiver already in round 1.
Now, if Heath were on the show, he may have taken Brock Bowers there for Dave and Jamey. It's just a little bit too early for Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
So 211, maybe a tight end comes into play here. You've got pick 211. So you're picking again in just a few more picks at 3.2, but you've already drafted Bijan Robinson, and now you need to make your second round pick. You've got Bijan, pardon me. These 4 players are still on the board. Are you taking Trey McBride, T. Higgins, Ladd McConkey, or Bucky Irving?
And I get to pick 2 of these guys, right, Adam?
You do, but who's your first one?
The first one's Bucky Irving, who I think can take a big step forward this year in Tampa. I love the way that he put up numbers last year, and he only played north of 60% of the snaps in 3 games. So there's meat on the bone still for Bucky Irving to put up huge numbers. And then I've got to take a pass catcher, and obviously you're only giving me 3 pass catchers. Give me T. Higgins, who really stepped up last year, didn't play the full season for Cincinnati, but when he did play, just absolutely awesome. The Bengals defense is still a mess. The offense is going to put up a ton of points. Joe Burrow is going to throw a lot of passes. They're going to be top 5 in pass rate. And I think T. Higgins is going to come down with a lot of touchdowns and have another really big year.
All right, Jamey, let's go to round 3. You've got the 6th pick of round 3. Your first 2 rounds, you went wide receiver, running back. So you got a balanced start here. Now, and with your 3rd round pick, who are you taking? Devontae Adams, Lamar Jackson, JSN, or James Cook?
It's pretty easy for me to take the 2 receivers. To go with a hero RB build, I think is the right way to start almost any team you could, put together. And you're looking at these 2 wide receivers who have top 10 upside, especially for Adams as long as Matthew Stafford is healthy. But JSN, I think, is going to build off what we saw last season, even with Sam Darnold at quarterback. I like the setup for both these guys as round 3 picks. If you're talking about, I can get both these guys in round 3 and round 4. So to go hero RB, I have my 2 receivers, I have my flex PPR league. I'm good to go.
Now, listen, if you've been watching since the beginning of today's show, you heard me talk a little smack. That's what fantasy football is about, right? Talk a little smack to Jamey, said I drafted better teams than Jamey. Well, we're going to put that to the test. We're going to compare teams from our pick-by-pick series after this break on Fantasy Football Today. Let's take a look at the results of our recent mock draft. 12 teams, 3 wide receivers, full PPR, and we were exploring different ways to build a roster. So you're going to see 2 teams 1 and 2 side by side here. Jamey drafted from the 1 spot. I drafted from the 2 spot. Dave, you were just hitting the casinos and not drafting at all that week, weren't you, Dave?
Sounds like something I would do.
Okay. Well, you tell us what do you think about these 2 teams, and I think what you're going to notice here is that Jamey and I from the 1 and 2 spots, forget about for now which one you like better, but just the build here. We didn't love the tight end value early. We didn't love the quarterback value early. So we really just hammered running backs and wide receivers and built that out. And I have Baker Mayfield plus Tyler Warren and Mark Andrews. He has Dak Prescott and Travis Kelce. So just your thoughts on spending your first 7 picks on nothing but receivers and running backs in a 3-receiver PPR league.
This year, I think it's a great way to go about doing things. You're looking for value at quarterback and tight end on draft day. And the reason why you can do that is because there are like 18 quarterbacks that I would feel okay starting in week number 1. And this is a 12-team league. So clearly there's going to be depth of the position. Tight end, not quite as deep as quarterback, but still good enough where you can wait a little bit and you can load up at the running back and wide receiver positions. And in this league, it's 3 wide receivers and a flex, if I'm not mistaken. And you're only starting 8 players. So half of your league can be wide receivers. That's why I'm going to give a slight lean to Jamey and how he built his team. He's got a great foursome at wide receiver. He's got good depth at running back. I like his values at quarterback and tight end a little bit better. Adam, your best value may have been Xavier Worthy. I think that's good, but I think your draft could have been a little bit better after that. Jamey just came away with Kamara, Pickens, Caleb Johnson. I think the too many good values for Jamey made his team a little bit better than yours.
Jamey, I'm going to tell you the one reason I like my team a little bit better is because I feel so much more comfortable with Cortland Sutton, who I took 47th, than I do with DJ Moore, who you took 48th. It's just one of those things where, it's totally a personal thing. But how do you see it? Do you think your team is better than mine? I'm happy with that 4th round pick I made. I didn't want to have to take DJ Moore there. But what do you think?
I do like Sutton better than DJ Moore. I think that was a great pick by you. And just for context, I don't know how much that would have changed things. We did do this draft prior to the Rashee Rice news, so who knows if Worthy would have been there for you in round 5. Look, we when you pick back-to-back, you're going to have a lot of similar players and similar values because of how they're viewed, and I think you should probably just tell everybody you were using my ranking, so to make it easy.
I was
not. Sure. So the nice thing about both our teams is there's, I think, immense upside for both of these rosters, especially if Worthy hits, for example, depending on how long Rice is out, if Olave can be good. And I think both of us, probably had to play off of our rosters a little bit. I know for me, for example, I took George Pickens over Chris Olave, even though I have it ranked that way, but I specifically avoided taking 2 Saints, for example. And I said to you, we've talked about this a lot on our podcast, like you could have really made things difficult for me and made me have to take the choice of T. Higgins to pair with Jamar Chase if you had taken, let's say, Ladd McConkey over Higgins or somebody else in that range, to have to make me take both Bengals receivers back-to-back, which I don't recommend taking with your first 2 picks, as good as those guys can be. So both these teams should be good. Again, you're competing for second place. You're going to just watch me get handed the trophy and the big check. And, listen, I'll take you out for a nice dinner.
Listen, the funny thing is you have 2 teams in this league, and so do I. So I guess I'm really competing for 3rd place behind Team 1 and Team 7 for Jamey. But
I'll be 1 and 3. You'll be 2 and 4. It's good.
Okay, fair enough. I like even numbers. Just a real quick follow-up. Do you think maybe if you could do it again that you would actually take Bijan Robinson number 1 overall? Because then this wouldn't eliminate you from taking T. Higgins at the 2-3 turn, which is great value for Higgins.
It is great value for Higgins, but I like Chase as the best player in fantasy, so I'm not going to make that the reason why I pass on him and take Bijan.
All right. Maybe I shouldn't say great value, but good value for Higgins. Let's take a look at the second teams that Jamey and I drafted from the 7 and 8 spots in this draft. And these teams were extremely different, whereas teams 1 and 2 were very similar. You can see I took McCaffrey, A.J. Brown, quarterback, tight end. And yet this was another team where Jamey gets great value on Bo Nix, 144th overall, and Evan Ingram around before that. So he once again waits on quarterback and tight end. So he's got me destroyed at wide receiver. Now, when we did this draft, it looked like I had the edge at running back because Joe Mixon, we didn't think it was that serious. So if for those of you out there could maybe just pretend that Joe Mixon isn't currently hurt.
Pretend it's James Conner. Adam, you would have taken James Conner there and he was still available.
Yeah, sure.
Do I get a mulligan on Chris Godwin too then?
No, you're stuck with Godwin.
Yeah. But no, Dave, we structure these teams very differently, and we've talked about this on a podcast before, but now that you've had some time to think about it, do you like Jamey's approach or do you like mine, being more aggressive at quarterback and tight end?
I like your approach if it's in a league where catches don't count for very much, or if it's a 10-team league, an 8-team league. Not in a league like this. This is 12 teams, 3 wide receivers, and a flex. I think in that deep of a format, taking a quarterback and a tight end with 2 of your first 5 picks sets you up to have some weak spots at other places in your lineup. You're going to have to be a very active fantasy manager, which you should be anyway, to try and cultivate talent off the waiver wire. I do think Jamey went a little hog wild with his wide receivers. He had 6 wide receivers before drafting a third running back, and Travion Henderson was the second running back, not to mention a quarterback and a tight end. So I think he may have gone a little overboard there. But his receivers just blow yours out of the water. That's half the starting lineup. I'd rather have Gibbs than Christian McCaffrey. So his team, again, it's close. You did a decent job, Adam, but I think Jamey's team did come out a little bit stronger than yours.
I will say, Adam, that we have a lot of trade potential here because of the depth I have at wide receiver. And even though you did take Mixon, we don't know when he's going to return, you did cover yourself with Nick Chubb. You also took Jerome Ford, again, with Quinshon Judkins' situation. Ford could be the starting running back there for the Browns. So we might be able to work out some sort of a deal here. The biggest reason, and really it's the only reason, because I love your team here, the only reason why I would give my roster an edge over yours is you had the easiest layup of all layups in round 10 to take Isaac Orendo and cover yourself with the 49ers backfield. And I'm watching the draft unfold, and I see the way that the players are, because, again, I know you're using my rankings, and I see you take Kyle Williams, and I'm like, he didn't. I can't believe he did it. All right, I'm going to take Orendo, and I'll be very happy with it if, unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey has to miss any time. But that's just the layup of all layups, Adam. You had it right in your lap. Like, we say, look for him as early as round 8 just to make sure you get this backfield covered. To see him sitting there around 10. And listen, I like Kyle Williams, but I don't think the upside is the same, but both get the equal amount of playing time.
Also, I'll just say this. Like, let's say we were doing a show and 30,000 people were watching or something, and I was alone on a basketball court, and you said to me, you have to dribble from one baseline to the next and make a layup. I do not think I would make the layup. I'm pretty sure I would miss it. So I miss a lot of layups, Jamey. That's the point of the story. We're going to come back with your questions. Ask FFT your questions on X after this on FFT. See you soon. Thanks, everybody, so much for your questions. Jim wants to know, Jamey, I'll throw this to you. Is Hero RB the best way to go in full PPR 3 wide receiver leagues? What do you think?
100%. I think it gives you an opportunity to load up on wide receiver and then get some very good value at running back.
Dave, you agree?
I do. And I think it's doable this year. And Hero RB doesn't mean a round 1 running back either. You can find a running back that you can build around as late as maybe early round 4 in your fantasy league. So you don't have to force it with a running back in round 1 if you don't want to.
All right, let's go to our next question here. Dinesh, what's up, Dinesh? How do you view the Buffalo wide receiver group? I don't know what to make of Shakir, Coleman, and Palmer, and Curtis Samuel is still part of the setup. Yeah, and you know what? Shakir, Coleman, Palmer, I've read great things about all 3 of them in the last 24 hours. They're not all going to be great. So, Dave, how do you view the Bills wide receivers?
With my eyes. But when it comes to fantasy, I think Shakir is the safest of the 3. He's probably good for around 12 PPR points per game. Keon Coleman has the most upside of the 3. He could become a touchdown magnet from Josh Allen. And Josh Palmer, someone who I thought was going to have a big year last year, I was dead wrong. I don't know if I would believe in a third receiver in Buffalo. It's been a long time since the Bills receiving core had multiple good options in fantasy. I just think that they keep getting usurped by Josh Allen running the football in for touchdowns, and James Cook was involved in so many touchdowns last year. So I don't want to invest too much in any of these wide receivers, but their ADPs are fine. Shakir, somebody who could be a borderline wide receiver 3. Coleman, high upside. Josh Palmer, you might draft him and cut him after 1 or 2 weeks.
All right, let's go rapid fire here to our next one. It's from Scott. Scott says, if Bijan Robinson goes first, do I go Garrett Wilson at 23? Well, if he takes Bijan in the first, do I go Garrett Wilson at 23 and Kittle at 26, or McBride and then Josh Allen, Jamey?
I would go McBride and Josh Allen.
Yeah, don't take Garrett Wilson 23rd overall. Next question. Between these 4, Dave, which 2 do you like in PPR? Breece Hall, Kamara, Mixon, Ken Walker.
You can throw Mixon right out because we know he's not practicing anytime soon. Kamara is one of my favorites in full PPR. He's got huge upside. His ADP is low. I would go with him and Walker. I love what I've been hearing about Walker in Seattle so far this camp.
Next question, last question from TD. Smaller leagues, Jamey, like a 10-team PPR, 2 receivers, 1 flex. How soon would you recommend quarterback and tight end? Real quick.
If you get great value, then take it, because in smaller leagues, you want to get those position advantages if you can.
All right, we got another episode on Wednesday. Listen to our podcast, Fantasy Football Today. For Dave and Jamey, I'm Adam. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much, everyone.